to look at things in their ideas. That's a very Platonic view, but that's what metaphysics has been preoccupied with since Plato. The different beings, and they're all understood according to one being, the being, which to him can be a principle, it can be a god. But we cannot interrogate the being because its position in our thinking is, by definition, is outside understanding. For Heidegger, there should be some kind of cause or the reason for the unfolding of the essence of the being to appear so that there is such a being.
Can the god create the stone as heavy that he himself cannot lift?
You cannot provide an ultimate proof that everything is based on the principle of identity.
Every statement that you say, right, there is always at least 3 to 4 different perspectives. It's interpretation, let's call it that way. We are starting the series of the name EXISTENTIA, where we discuss psychology, philosophy, metaphysics, experience, and everything that is related to the overall human existence. The conversations will have broad topic. We try to structure them in the nicest way possible, even though basing on how our conversations actually go, it is very hard to structure them per se. So you are being invited to follow the thought that we are uncovering during our conversations, and with every new episode we will become more focused, more precise, and conversations will surely be more interesting. So welcome. I could have begun this by saying welcome to philosophy club, but this is actually not a philosophy club.
Yes.
This is the conversation that we are holding, and we are trying to dig deep into substances and matter, for the sake of the word. And we will be talking here in this section about existential things. This is the point why this section is being called Existentia. And yeah, basically we will hold conversations here about complicated things that require some thought to process, some attention to follow, and we are hoping that you might get interested in the conversation as it goes. And today we start our talk with Alexi. Yes, Alexi Shabanov, and you can give a word about who you are and why we are actually doing this today.
Hi, my name is Alexi. I started this as if it's like a job interview, but actually, my name is Alexi. I graduated from Brown recently. I was doing Slavic studies and European critical thought. And as it happens that by trade, I'm doing clinical psychology. But by training, I study a lot of philosophy and literature. And these are my main focuses, specifically Eastern European literature and German philosophy. That's why I'm kind of very happy. And thank you so much, Anton, for inviting me to your brilliant podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, yeah, me too, because I was impressed by the way you think, what you know, and how you put things together. That's why I'm actually having a little problems explaining what this conversation is about, because we have a topic which is modern psychology, how it fits the entire thread of philosophical thought, if you can call it that way, right? And yes. We do not really have an agenda. So basically, it's just the conversation. And let's see how it all goes. So yeah, my pleasure to talk to you, actually, considering the time difference and that we live on different continents. Still, we decided we will try to discuss modern psychology, its cognitive aspect, you're right, and how it takes a root and interacts and develops on the basis of the history of metaphysics and psychoanalysis, which is also, already a nice introduction into what the conversation might go. And let's just start with your thought, and I will just be kind of throwing in whatever pops up into my mind.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think that's a very laudable introduction that we've come up together. Because in some sense, at least what I feel how it's going to look, it's going to be a bit much less than philosophy is about, and much more than that, because we're not constrained by any academic restrictions, and we can just basically talk. Yeah, and I see we can basically continue our first episode as a continuation of our nice fireside chat that we had a couple of, 5 weeks ago, yes. Yeah. That's interesting thing that we came up with, because in some sense, I think what we discovered is that psychology, as we're both working in this field, and kind of philosophy and psychoanalysis have so much in common. and these ties are not often acknowledged. And it's just interesting to look at different things together from this like three different perspectives, where there is psychology, psychoanalysis, and philosophy. And that's why I think I came up with the idea for today's series. It's like existence as the problem in psychology, literature, and philosophy, because that's precisely a big problem that we're not really acknowledging. I mean, we are acknowledging, but not really.
Actually, I liked when we were talking how we view things from different angles, when you are not trying to be dogmatically rigid, if that's the word. So just this is just the way it is and not, and this is like a game of fluid intelligence, if you can call it that way. So yeah, that's why I'm excited how it will go today.
Yeah, I'm also really excited. Yeah, and I think just a quick disclaimer about what I mean by metaphysics. I guess like the best like way to kind of describe metaphysics is metaphysics, or metaphysis from ancient Greek. That is like something that is not physical, or like abstraction, or if we are to take different angle, is to say it would be to say what it means to look at things in their ideas. That's a very Platonic view, but that's what metaphysics has been preoccupied with since Plato. That is how there are things on the ground and there are the ideas in our minds. And these ideas may be in things, like for Aristotle, but essentially there's a strict division between, let's say, this cup and idea of a cup. That's been kind of unthought or like uninterrogated up until like 1940s of the, couple of, decades ago, quite many decades ago. So I think that's how I started, was the discussion of metaphysics and sort of understanding that that's something that's kind of created our whole outlook of the world. Because obviously we're all humans. We are very much conditioned by biology, by behavior. There's the whole branch of behaviorism that discusses that. But I think what really stands out in our case is that the fact that we have language. And so far as we have language, we can take things abstractly. And that's where metaphysics kicks in, because that's something that's been going exactly kind of within this pretty large framework where we have beings and ideas about beings for quite a while. And why it's interesting, I would say in many ways, because that's not the only way how you can look at it. Because if we're really thinking about it, everything is a being to some extent. Everything is, but in a very specific sense of metaphysical being, that is, everything is present or presents itself. Even if something is absent, we can name it in its idea, and that's why it's present. Like, let's say at the moment on my desk, I do not have a can of Coke, although I would love to have it. But since I can name the fact there is no can of Coke, it kind of is. Like it is present in some sense in ideas. It's being manifested in one way or another, though not in a physical way. And that's the approach that phenomenology takes, and psychoanalysis. And why I think it's very much related to psychology, because the founder of phenomenology, Franz Brentano, also founded psychology. If we're looking through like different writings of, let's say, Husserl and all these like cool things, people who try to understand how mind works from a philosophical standpoint, they were doing a lot of philosophy. And then psychoanalysts were reading them. And then there was this whole kind of dissemination of knowledge that was stemming from precisely metaphysical point of view about the world. And we can look at this also from a different perspective. Let's say large language models. That's a very hot topic, obviously. And like, but we should talk about it because, it's
definitely no objections on that point. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to tackle it, but I think we can start this time. The same thing. I absolutely despise it. But sometimes it's fun to find something, and then this something is actually a hallucination in the AI model. And so you're being given fake information. But that's one of the examples how metaphysics works, because what the AI model is doing, it operates only with words or with ideas. It has absolutely no connection to the physical reality apart from being housed in insanely huge data centers. But it's ultimately devoid of any reality except for ideas. And that's kind of one of the manifestations of metaphysics, where it is like the ideas rule everything. You have an idea according to which you frame the world in some sense, or other ideas. Let's say if you want to, with an LLM, if an LLM receives a request from you, like what it is doing is basically in framing all the information it knows to fit into your request. And that's where it creates hallucinations, because the main thing, like what it is doing is basically answering your prompt, your request. And even if it cannot answer it, it's gonna hallucinate to answer it. Because like it views the things and ideas in terms of how they frame, kind of like in terms of how it can frame it for your prompt. So that's kind of like my brief introduction was the metaphysics and kind of the history of all the things, which I think kind of may shed light a little bit more on where we're coming from to this conversation and where we kind of can start it. I actually have a quote about something. I even did my homework. I have this nice little book by Martin Heidegger, Basic Writings, first edition actually, where I think we can start with a nice quote to kickstart our conversation, so that it's not only me talking, but also there's some other things. So it's the Basic Writings, page 432, and the essay is called "The End of Philosophy." The quote goes, "What characterizes metaphysical thinking, which sticks out the ground for beings, is the fact that metaphysical thinking, starting from what is present, represents it in its presence and thus exhibits it as grounded by its ground." Which I think here, what he really means, because Heidegger had a lot of problems. The first one starting from the fact that he was a Nazi. And this, like all other, that's a huge part with that's a big part of it.
I recently had a conversation with my colleagues about his, let's call it preferential background, right?
Oh yeah, he was. It's so weird that in his defense, in the 1971 interview to Der Spiegel, he said, "Oh no, I was not Nazi or anti-Semitic. I had Jewish girlfriends. What do you mean?" It's like, come on. Yeah, but he was definitely Nazi. He was anti-Semitic. He was not an active supporter, but he was, as his black notebooks that were recently discovered suggest, he was a Nazi. Apart from that, he really influenced any philosophy or thinking which relates to social sciences and humanities in the 20th century. Like he's the kind of the guy for that part. And what here he means is that like there is the different beings, and they all understood according to one being, the being, which to him can be a principle. It can be a god. It can be a principle. It can be, like in capitalism, value, and so on and so forth. And what he here suggests is that ultimately we're all thinking about beings, and we try to justify them based on their ground through the being that apparently somehow contains all the beings, be this being, for example, God, or as I've said, principle, or something else. But we cannot interrogate the being because its position in our thinking is, by definition, is outside understanding. It is not something that we can encounter. It is something that we can understand through beings. But ultimately, how can we know that it's not fiction? How can we know that there is the being that connects all the beings within its idea? That's kind of one of his questions, and that's how he starts kind of this essay. It was written in the early 1930s, right before when he got really weird, and right after his magnum opus, where he tried to understand being. And here he's not really talking about beings. He's talking about the way how we can try to understand the world around us without positing it on the ground that ultimately groundless. Because how can we prove that there is, for example, a certain uniting principle unless we look through how this principle is represented in all other things, people, objects, and so on and so forth? You cannot. But then ultimately you're looking at objects, and you're not trying to understand this ground, this being in itself or by itself as such. It's like trying to see the the tree behind in my window just by looking through the window. Sure, but you can just open the window or like, go downstairs and look at this tree more closely. So what's the point of that? That's kind of one of his things that he meant here.
What is ground in this, let's call it a model? Because when we're talking about things, right, and how they if you can use the word overlap with ideas, I'm using it very roughly. We might talk about like core or essence of the things, like in terms of the ideal approach. So I'm wondering, in his words, ground in this case is referring to what exactly?
For Heidegger, again, that's not me, it's kind of me explaining Heidegger. That would not be the essence, because the essence for him is the unfolding of the thing. But the unfolding of the thing, or in German, Wesen, or becoming, unfolding, he uses a lot of different kind of connotations for this word, always happens based on something. Like, it doesn't happen ex nihilo. Like, it always has a ground. It's not that out of nowhere. And that's one of the problems with Heidegger, for example. He does not really interrogate that part. But he says that there should be certain ground for that. Or, in other words, a reason, or causa, or cause in English. I forget the Greek word for that, but the Latin word stems from causa, that is ultimately related to the word res, which is the thing. Or if we're playing this like etymological games, which may be meaningless, for Heidegger at least, that means that there should be some kind of cause or the reason for the unfolding of the essence of the being to appear, so that there is such a being. And this ground, there can be many different grounds. If we're talking, let's say, about medieval philosophy, medieval Christian philosophy in particular, like Thomas Aquinas or St. Augustine, there's going to be God. The God created the world within 6 days. On the 7th day, he was drinking beer, allegedly, or wine. I would prefer beer. But then, and then everything stems from this fact. But the ultimate cause, or as far as I remember, it would be causa finalis, is God. We're talking about Kant, that the ultimate cause is like causeless. It just happens to be that there is cause. And later, this thinking kind of goes on with different names. But in terms of the location, there should be this ultimate bedrock, which you cannot interrogate. It's just there, and it's like, it's there. Because how can it not be there?
That's why I didn't really like the medieval philosophy in this context, you know. The explanations back then were, can the god create the stone as heavy that he himself cannot lift? And even in this statement, there are so many questions that we could actually...
That's actually a very good question. Like, depends on whom you ask, you're going to get so many different answers, even within 1 century. Like... because the question is like at stake is the God all powerful or no?
And for me, I don't know if we went into this discussion. I mean, it's semi-religious, but the God being personal versus impersonal, right? And by the way you explained me this, so okay, we are coming back to the ground. So for me, it also sounded like there is a space for the thing / being as something shaped up. There should be space to unfold. So basically,
that's what Heidegger wants you to think, because he's a phenomenologist. He's really into the phenomena, or our experience of things as they appear. And he can understand Heidegger only if you visualize him. Like in that case, because later, I'm not introducing that, and I didn't introduce it, but like later he will talk about the space, the opening up of a space, and it all is connected with the ground, but also with the groundlessness of the ground. Because if you think about it, you cannot provide an ultimate proof that everything is based, and let's abandon the example of God, but let's say that everything is based on the principle of identity. That like, and And that's
just think of it like for the external listener. So there is ground, and then let's assume that everything is just based on the principle of identity.
Yeah, it's a bit later. It's like
Love it.
Yeah,
love it. Just go ahead. I had to comment.
For him, there was God, of course, but the God is also like a part. Like he had this whole idea about the city of God and like different, whatever. It's weird. We're not gonna go into that. But his main thing was that everything, like the things are identical to itself. If you, let's say, see this cup is identical to itself. That's the principle of identity. Because otherwise nothing works. Otherwise kind of logic does not really work. Of course, in the modern logic, there are all different theories about that and approaches, but like that was for Leibniz. And that's kind of what kickstarted the 18th century philosophy up until, mid 20th century. But even in that case, you like this ground is ultimately groundless, because how can you prove it? Like, is this cup really this cup? But every second it loses atoms. And at the same time, this time there is some black coffee in there. 2 days ago there was black tea. So is this really the same cup, or can we like dissect it? And what is the cup ultimately then? So like there are a lot of questions that here may be a bit a bit difficult to answer, or there may be a lot of answers. But what remains is that it is extremely hard to suggest the principle of identity, because ultimately it is extremely hard to prove that A equals A, however weird it sounds. And, and that's for Heidegger, the opening for everything. Because the moment you think that there is a room and there's the unfolding of something out of something, but there is no out of something. There is the room without floors. Like there is no floor, there's no ground. It's like a huge tube. Endless tube and not a room. That actually is very interesting to think about, and like to think in these terms.
But how literal they were in because Heidegger, German, very literal probably, right? Meaning, saying whatever he means, like ground means ground, unfold means unfold, identity is identity, right? And every statement that you say, right, there is always at least 3 to 4 different perspectives on its interpretation, let's call it that way. So that's a simple example. I was just going to say simple cognitive psychologists. Cognitive psychologists, why do I call them that way? It's simple. Like we have perception that is a sort of a system that is a sort of stable, right, which based on the principle of identity allows us to identify objects that are identical to themselves, right, as far as I understood, and they are relatively constant, right, in this relatively always changing environment, right? Because like for the atoms, indeed, if we zoom in and then we see the structure, it is indeed losing atoms, right? So basically, how logical question, and this is we also need to talk about logic and then formal logic, right? How it's been developed. It's kind of, and how you differ, like logic and common sense. Do they overlap? No. Yes, but we still see this identical picture. I mean, with human bodies, it's kind of easier to because we do see the change with material objects. Well, physics says us this, and then we run into metaphysics. That's the point of having metaphysics, right? To an extent. I'll tell you a little bit of personal reflection. Before I couldn't understand, like, why do we need to spend time discussing all of this, namings, labels, what's the purpose of it? But then you, with one conversation, convinced me that the major point of this is not the truth, if it could be found. It's the way of thinking. It's the way of, showing or unfolding how you come to the conclusion, and the broadness of your, I think you can call it a toolkit, right? Like
you can definitely do it.
Whatever it comes from, and how you can juggle that a little bit. That's the thing about it.
Yeah, I think that's the precisely, yeah. And the interesting part about your example, I think, is that of course, yeah, we can say that, a cup, or like, if of course we can say that, like, perceptually there is, going to psychology, we as humans can kind of recognize that cup is that cup, but we kind of do it automatically, and it does not really prove that cup is that cup. It proves that our perception thinks or suggests that cup is that cup. And like we can like do it, it can be like a different cup, a little bit of a different shape or slightly different tone, but it's going to be a different cup. Or it can be the identical cup to this one, absolutely identical, and it's going to be still kind of the same cup, but not really. So I think that what here becomes interesting, that like, in some sense, I would say a lot of ways how we interrogate the world are all based on metaphysics and on these assumptions that we can definitely dig up into truth and get it. And the truth is always, to some extent, abstract. Because like you can imagine this cup as unchanging, for example, or any cup or anything, only in abstraction. Like if you're really kind of with, like, so to speak, within the experience of the cup, or let's say you're drinking from this cup, or you just look somewhere around the cup, it is never unchanging. In your experience, it always changes. Let's say the sun goes down, the light kind of like puts a different shade on it, or you're finishing your coffee and it kind of becomes stained with coffee like on the inside. And my cup, for example, is white, so I can kind of clearly see how I'm progressing through my second cup of coffee today. And then that's, I think, one thing where psychology and like post-Heideggerian philosophy can interact is precisely in the fact that there is no abstraction. Like there is abstraction only in our minds, but we cannot find it in the world or in our experience of the world. We can find abstraction and insights from abstraction only in our experience of abstraction when we're thinking about it. But then, it kind of goes sideways. Here there's a very like inspiring guy, Edmund Husserl, who was like the father of phenomenology, who talked a lot about the intentionality. He dig up this concept from like old medieval books and developed it, where there is, within our experience of phenomena or of things that present themselves to us, there's always our own intentionality. Like the moment you look at this cup and you think that you don't want this coffee, this cup becomes irrelevant. It's just on the background. But if you really want this coffee, this cup suddenly in your mind, in your experience of this particular situation, is kind of glowing up a little bit. It's like in a computer game or like in old cartoons where like when the protagonist needs to touch something in the cartoonish world, this particular object is going to be a little bit lighter. That's kind of, obviously it's not lighter in our perception, but we look at the world with the desire, with this intention toward the cup quite differently. And that's, I think, what can be really productive in terms of how we think about things and people. That's precisely the fact that it's not just one way thing. Like, we don't exist in abstraction, and like we cannot form our opinions or insights from abstraction, but we have to form it from our experience and our observation. That is from how things appear. And in this way, noticing our intentionality towards them.
I wonder when you clearly explained where the concept is coming from. But again, when I hear intentionality, it could be also kind of like related to many other things. So basically, you think intentionality, motivation, no. Desires, no. I always keep getting into this, let's call it, you're doing it from more philosophical standpoint.
Yeah.
And I'm forced to somehow, yeah. I think about psychological aspects.
But that's precisely that's I think why we're having this conversation, is that like we're all kind of coming from to this from different perspectives, and there are like very different ways how to describe it. But if I use the word desire, oh boy, I wouldn't be trying to have my interpretation of Husserl. I would go to Lacan or Freud, because that's where it's all about desires or motivation. That would be to some extent Freud, but also to the other extent like 1970s psychology.
I want to like rewind back to intentionality because it kind of triggered me because of the some thought processing that have been happening. And when we were again in the free time, what we do, we try to describe or to find the model that fits the most to describe whatever is happening around us. And intentionality was a very nice point here where we try to describe what you actually really want. Again, we're not talking about the desire. We're talking about probably certain orientation, right? Intentionality. So I do not, let's say, necessarily want coffee, or I'm not conditioned to have coffee at 9 a.m. because I've been doing that for, I don't know, many years before. But this is just a sort of a self-reflective understanding of what you really kind of want at the point. And if you perform any action towards this, or not towards this, but we kind of like, we refer to actions as being as projecting yourself to the reality, sort of. I mean, like moving the hands is already a thing. And intentionality is your gentle willingness to do this. So I'm how do you call it, and here where it becomes very complicated. Let's say, example, I want to have this conversation not because you're the famous blogger and you have, I don't know, 10,000 of followers, and then by having a conversation or co-creation of the content with you, I'll receive my own benefits. So this is, with every sentence I say, I ever open up every new compartment with every word to explain. So I'm just like, no, I'm doing this again. Anton, chill. We are talking about intentionality in this case, so sort of being coherent with yourself, knowing your desires, so to say. And this word, for me, seems much more gentle than the desire, because the desire is that actually something, the way I assume Freud has been interpreting it, and as well as Lacan to an extent, right? So, and I kind of understand where it all is coming from back then, right? It's
good old days.
Good. It's a big but intentionality is, I just want to. Okay, let me just calm down, and then you continue with this, how it all shifted from intentionality. And it's also the nice word to use when we are trying to describe, like, we also, we psychologists, right? Especially in therapy, we ask questions. So like, what do you really want?
But do you think the patient knows their desire?
Like, none of us probably. We think we do, but then it's so this, in that context, this intentionality was the criterion, that we try to set up. Like, is it really something that's why a lot of let's call them people, right? In general, I'm not talking about the big minds. I'm talking about people talking to other people, like, speak from your heart, do from your heart, and so on. Again, we in psychotherapy, we in psychology, when you have problems, we literally have techniques asking people, like, where is it in your body? Like, your anxiety, is it here? Is it here? Is it in your shoulders? By the way, I had the Pink Floyd here. I should have started with this. Yes. Introducing.
That's brilliant.
And yes, so like, where is in the body? So we are embodied creatures to an extent. So it's kind of easy to us, even if we have sort of a bad connection with mind and body, we kind of feel it somehow if we're being attentive. So why I'm bringing this notion of the heart here, this is probably the most widely clear, right, widely understandable term to explain this intentionality that I'm talking about. So this is something that I really want to do, and I really want to do that just because, right? Just because it seems, and I keep using again sorry for like messing this around, but I keep using this ego dissolution thingy.
Oh yeah.
So like if you ask me what is my desire, I mean, I do have like 3. I want to eat, I want to drink some water when I'm thirsty, and I would love to sleep. Like this is definitely mine that concern me. Like, but
So basic creatures.
yeah, then why are you doing all this? Like, why are you having this conversation? Why are you writing the proposals? Why are you like filming reels? What's the point for it? And then here comes rationalization.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think with intentionality, if we're talking about it like specifically in the context like phenomenology means it, it's more about it's less abstract. It's like it's at the moment you sit and you acknowledge like good old technique. You sit, you acknowledge the surroundings, and at that moment you can already feel that you have intentionality because you have just acknowledged it. But what I think interesting part here would be is like not to just think that your intentionality in that particular case is in acknowledging the space around you. In my case, let's say it's a desk, a bunch of books, and so on and so forth. But like the answer to what the intentionality, the mode of intention, let's put it this way, was in it may lie precisely in the moment before you even started acknowledging the space. In case of our conversation, it all began when you mentioned the ego psychology. I was like, oh, I need to talk about it. And so that in some sense conditioned my mode of intention, when I kind of started describing like how you scan the space around you, or you can scan the body. We can have long conversation about that. Because it's like it always to some extent responds to something. Like intentionality is not like ex nihilo. But it's not, but I don't agree with you. It's not as strong as the desire. Like its desire is imposing on you. It's like big brother. It's always watching you, and you cannot do without that because it's a part of you. Even the moment you think that this desire is different from you, it is part of your ego to a huge extent. So I think that's the interesting thing was this intentionality that we can think about, because ultimately we are all surrounded by beings in various capacity. If we take it super broadly, it's whatever is present or has presence, or I would even better say to whatever presence can be pertinent. That is to everything. Because that would I think better way.
I'm trying to keep silent.
Because I think that's I think one of the problems with at least what I found in psychology, and please correct me if I'm coming from my biased American background here, is that like a lot of psychology seems to be very concerned about your subjectivity, you as the subject, versus your relations to things and beings around you that condition you as a subject. Which I think ultimately, obviously there are a lot of reasons for that, but ultimately places the subject at the clearest sort of pedestal. The subject is in the limelight of everything, but at the same time it misses a lot from the subject's life. For example, the person may exhibit the symptoms of depression and anxiety, but they have problems with like immigration. I'm talking about myself right now, but it's just like on top of my mind. But that may not be something that is inherently in the subjectivity, but something as some kind of a response to the fact that American immigration system is absolutely bad. So I think that's kind of something we can think about, like in the field of psychology, more versus like just prescribing pills and psychotherapy without thinking about the bigger picture. Of course, there is a concept of resilience and the whole study of resilience.
Here I have to cite the Soviet guys because
okay. Let's go.
They have been developing their approaches exclusively based on philosophy. So they've been reading all of this. And talking about subjectivity, there are two main approaches. And it's kind of weird if you proclaim them or like just simply say out loud. So basically, it sounds like internal acts through the external, thus changing itself. Approach number one. Approach number two, external acts through internal, thus changing the external. So this is a kind of a paradoxical connection, right? That was a literal translation from Russian, okay?
What does it mean? What do they mean by internal and external? Like, what's that?
It's like literally they don't even have the explanation for it. So if we talk about subject, right?
Okay.
So if basically you cannot change yourself unless you do something to the external, and thus you can change yourself. I don't know, if you want to comb your hair, for example, you have to act through the mirror, you have to act through the brush, right? Sort of. This is one of the simplest examples, but they were trying to build, I mean, as every philosophers back in, that was beginning of the 20th century approximately, they were trying to dig into the most fundamental principles that would describe maximally whatever is happening. I mean, you probably would enjoy reading Rubinstein if you have heard of him. I've heard of that guy. That guy wrote a lot of things, and it's just, you know, so sometimes if you read the original, it's like a stream of consciousness, like partially structured, but it's a lot of words, so they could be compressed to several sentences. So again, this is more of you know, a following the reasoning, how the person thinks and how he in this case comes from one section to the other. But despite their restrictiveness of the Communist Party and blah blah blah, whatever that, but what was happening at the beginning of the 20th century, their hands were a bit, you know, tied to a little bit handicapped.
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit. They still were managing to show this flow of thought, and they got many followers, and that's why this tradition, that's why we have this huge discrepancy in how the Soviet, post-Soviet tradition was developing and how the American tradition was developing. I mean, and this gap has been like bigger and bigger, starting, I think, from 1960s. It's been like two almost parallel realities where things work. And so I'm not sure how problems have been resolved in the Soviet Union back then. But what we know about this, you know, experiments that have been that were conducted in the United States, and basically this is the approach that we tried to adapt, like in the recent 10 to 20 to 25 years. So behavioral, right? This is deterministic to an extent. But the Soviets were mostly concerning about this subject. They were talking about the subject, which is more of a philosophical concept that holds all of the experience that the person can have, and it kind of should be interacting with other subjects, of course, and they somehow needed to defend the collectivism, you know, and everything, and unification processes. And in the West we call it, especially in the United States, it kind of, the subject turned into what we call in cross-cultural psychology individualism, right? Like I am the holder of all of my properties, and I have, I don't know, there is the Fourth Amendment, and everybody is talking about, I defend my dignity, yes, defend my rights, defend my everything. Again,
and that's why guns, of course, machine guns.
Oh, well, that's...
Yeah. I mean, obviously.
Obviously. Yes. I mean, when I talk to you, like every word and every like statement that I say in my mind requires every additional explanation anytime I say like deterministic, like subjectivity. Well, this it's my I think I told you, like my psychologist told me, so when you talk to a person and you just throw in the variety of terms from different disciplines, and you expect that person to understand you, and I'm just like, well, yes. I'm picking the best terms to describe whatever is happening, you know, in this case. Not always successful, apparently, but I already lost. We started talking about the subjectivity, right? I'm being a part. a part of the therapy. I also conduct some therapy sessions, and I'm not a therapist myself. Recently, I received a very nice comment. I'm the worst psychotherapist that could ever be.
Wow. I think it should be like a honor.
For me, kind of like yes, but I mean, psychotherapy should be supportive and not oppressive, to an extent, because depending on what you're coming. But again, oppressiveness is also
It's how do you determine that?
Talking about truth. The only in my reasoning, I come to only one point. The truth is relative. Point.
Yeah. No, yeah, you can, yeah.
I mean, you
it's
can argue that the atoms are leaking from the cup and it's no longer the same. But again, I have many examples of people that judge the world into black and white, right and wrong, based on whatever is being said. There's all. I mean, you understand that why I'm saying relative, regarding of the discussion that you have with anyone, you kind of set up the criteria.
Yeah, implicitly.
Either implicitly or explicitly.
Yeah, but I would say it's not either or, it's both. Like we didn't really agree that much to try to explain every specific term we're using.
No, I mean,
but sort of our conversation demanded from us doing that. Although we kind of perfectly understand each other, almost perfectly, I mean, with some, caveats, of course, but it's kind of like it just happened. I think it's both implicitly and explicitly. You have to set
but can you imagine like explicitly setting up the criteria for the conversation, especially if it's something, I don't know, like regular life stuff?
Yeah, it's constitution. Kind of a constitution. Yeah. That's definitely, I think that's one of the things where like I'm really struggling with, politics a lot. Because
I don't want to go there. Like, if you want specific examples, but I mean, you can go on. But I'll avoid commenting.
Because you can say, the cultural conversations, cultural debates, or something like that. In the sense that it's hard to find a common ground because everyone is coming from different grounds, different sort of sets of predetermined principles that they either know, that they either are aware of or unaware of. And then it's harder for people to accept other sort of baseline, so to speak, parameters in order to have a conversation. And then we're talking about almost two different things. And that's, I think, very troubling and problematic because it's harder to create a shared canvas of meaning in that case because we're looking at things and beings from, at the same time, very close standpoint because we all assume that there is a principle of identity to some extent or to the other, and now we increasingly, and with AI even more increasingly, assume that everything has a value. Either it's a financial value or token value, like that, for large language model, there's going to be like tokens that kind of tokenize every word and blah, 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 and all of that, or any kind of other value. Either we explicitly acknowledge it, it's running in the background that structures our conversation, but somehow at another level of identity, it does not lead to the same understanding of some things, precisely because different standpoints are relative. That's why it's really interesting for me to kind of to have a conversation about the relativity of truth and stuff like that, because it's kind of relative, but not really. But I think the problem starts with the fact, what do we mean by truth? What is truth?
I tried to have a conversation about that one day, and I'm also trying to avoid this because there are several ways you can put the truth on. Oh, yeah. I'm very sorry for those who are, if I offend anyone, again, religiously. No. But I have conversational partners that say, the truth is in the Bible, point. Whatever you're trying to tell me beyond that, I won't even listen to it.
Yeah. I think it's reductionist in the sense that the Bible, in this case, serves like a constitution.
Sort of.
But then, again, the truth is not in the Bible, but in the interpreter, because the Bible cannot predict every single possible event of our life because there are more of them than numbers. I assume, or maybe like it's the multitude, that's the absolute totality, and the Bible obviously does not contain it.
It is an attempt to go like meta. When you go to the upper core principles under which you have all this range of possibilities.
Yeah, and you interpret them. Yeah.
You, as far as I can understand, are looking for the similar things that I do, like if this, then that, then that, then that, then that. And we have the capacity to hold it. That's why like every word I'm saying requires additional explanation. And that's why I don't read and I don't write. Because it is too slow.
Exactly. But it has a very different passage of thinking when you write. Because especially when you don't write on laptop, either by hand or on typewriter. I have a typewriter here, which I use a lot, because you cannot really come back and change it. It's like conversation. You can't really come back and change what you have said a minute ago. But I think it creates a sort of beautiful passage of thought. Yeah, and I think exactly that's why, you know, if you're saying that, oh, it's true because it's said there, it's been said there or there, it's not really faithful. Because it's true because you interpret it as being said there or there.
Exactly.
Because you can find, even if you may not find a million of counterexamples as there are in the Bible, because there are so many books, and there are especially the New Testament, and different, you know, branches of Christianity acknowledge different books. Like that's already a lot. As far as I remember, in like the Orthodox Church acknowledges 52 books, and like Catholic 45 or something. Like that's insane amount. Even if we are not talking about that, like you still need to understand how to apply this principle and interpret this principle and its application. And at that point, you already lose the common ground. I mean, that's why we have Catholicism and like the Orthodox Church, for example, just like one example. Yeah, so that maybe a bit difficult to discuss it when there is certain dogmaticism.
Oh, definitely. I was scrolling the news recently, like checking what's happening, and it's like, considering all the variety of, let's call them ideas that are out there. I'm just picking the random one, right? Religious, like sex related, or I mean, gender related, political, and everything. It's you know, like we joke sometimes, if somebody has invented this world to kind of like exercise ideas and check if they stick, this is the perfect place for this, because somebody throws something out, and then we have like, oh, you have to relate to it. Here are the facts. Everybody's looking for the facts, but then there is it's a crazy machine of interpretation, reinterpretation, reinterpretation. You know, and one before it kind of lands on you. I was listening, like for the last 2 days, a very simple topic: nutrition. I was listening to a podcast, right? And the scientist is talking about this, and they say, we have this evidence, we have that evidence. Yes, okay, we have clear evidence because somebody's getting healthy, somebody's getting less healthy. But he kind of like threw in this interesting idea that, but diets are not only about nutrition. Diets are about the ideas, you know, and that this group of people actually hold. And he says, like, we have vegan. I cannot call myself a vegan because I eat mostly plants. Yes, but my diet is plant-based diet, and this is what I identify with. But when I call myself vegan, it usually has this connotation where defend, and this is, again, these are just the examples. So coming back to where is the truth in this? Again, coming back, I'm not even starting the conversation of where it is and what is it based on, because I don't know, again, cognitive psychologists, neuropsychologists, they would say, well, based on your like perceptual repetition in perceptual consistency, for example,
the frontal
that
lobe
could be ruined.
On the frontal lobe,
we have patterns that repeat themselves in each and every moment.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a nice statement that I recently came up to when I talk to people who are, we call them, how do you translate this one? The ones who no longer feel the ground under their feet. So basically, they go into this metaphysical matters that they can hardly understand.
And like, how do you say it in Ukrainian or in Russian?
It's like flew away people.
Oh,
it's like отлетевшие, you know.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
it's a tough one, right?
Yeah, I don't really use this word too much in other languages.
I figure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
not
from this world, but the idea when they try to defend these ideas, and I forgot what was going to say about, and no, I lost it.
Oh, that happens.
No.
We're talking about repetition.
It's all about truth. It's also coming back to the truth. It all started with intentionality to me.
No, totally. Yeah, it just blew up our conversation. It's just like
I found something that kind of were triggering me. And again, all the time, every time you explain, every philosopher, like what he was mainly right, was basing on. You kind of see again. I can see this development and how human thought was preparing for new for well, I don't know if we can call it advancements, but changes for sure to an extent.
No, that's certainly, that's why like some things just couldn't have happened, like let's say 100 years ago. You couldn't have like modern psychiatry 100 years ago. Like absolutely there were chances, not only because you didn't know how to synthesize those substances, but because like your approach to the patient was like wildly and widely different, I would say. Yeah, and the interesting thing that you said about sort of repetition and how there is a multitude of ideas. The interesting part of studying literature is that every century, some weird guy in Europe would write a pamphlet about the fact that there are too many books and people are writing too many ideas, and it's all so meaningless, and we all should come back to the previous good old days before we were born, when there were not too many ideas and books, and it was all simple. Like you pick every century in Europe, in continental Europe, and there's going to be that kind of guy, for sure. That's the interesting thing. But I think what is interesting also now is like the logic of enfrainment, because I think the big part of the fact that it's hard to find a common ground is because we're really interested not in listening to others, but in following our idea. So we're basically focused on our idea versus the path that this idea takes. Let's say it may be like, response to someone. You have to listen to someone to really understand where this person is going. But if you just instantaneously pick a certain thread from there and just kind of criticize it or develop even it, you're not really listening to what is happening. You're not really trying to follow the thought. It's like reading. It's like if you read one page of the book, but then you skip another one and you start another one, it's like you're not really listening. You're not really trying to read. And I think that's a problem right now, because we're not really trying to understand how these ideas are moving, but we really want to move them instead, which is a problem. And it's like, you can talk about the attention economy, the attention spans, where, why bother reading if you can ask the ChatGPT? 10 years ago, I think it would be like, oh, why bother reading if you can read the introduction, blah, blah, blah. And it's all like different like ways how we can be lazy, but at the same time, how we stop understanding how other things are moving sort of beyond our control. And we want to exercise even more control over the things that we're trying to say or do. And for this matter, it can be a sentence, it can be a response, it can be an action or a policy or whatever, because you're narrowly focused on that versus focusing on how you're trying to achieve it. That is not like you're focused on the thing, not on the process. I think that's a very interesting part where you can think about the intentionality here, because that's what intentionality makes you consider, is the way how you relate to something, even within the conversation. And that kind of helps you listen to others, I think, and not really be like a train, like a highway. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm thinking which track to go from all that you mentioned. Indeed, it's for some reasons the only moment or like aspect that kind of pops up here as the most important is the perception of time.
Yeah.
Because the time itself did not change, right? We still have 24 hours. We still have it's just that the number of events that we could process within certain period of time has increased like significantly. I don't know if that's your age, but there were times when I was writing letters to my grandmother. Yes, like the post, and I was sending, and I was waiting for 2 weeks for it to become.
I'm sending letters to my friends. I'm in that tradition. Now it's more nostalgia, but it's not the necessity, it's nostalgia, but you know.
Yeah, but I mean, how overwhelmed we get, like, and right now I get, I don't know, roughly 50 to 100 emails daily.
Yeah. And then
80% of them
social media.
Everything, and we just how we think we're gonna cope with this. So why I'm saying this? I'm saying this to how you want to defend your idea, and reading. I'm just connecting these two dots. Let's just compare a tweet / a thread and the book.
Oh my God.
In the book, you take time, I know, years to explain something that you came up to, and you have, I don't know, one book may have how many words approximately? Well, like 20 to 30,000 words, right?
Oh, 20 to 30,000 is not much.
Well, still, I mean.
Yeah, it's like a really short book.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a typical 15-page article is 10,000 words. At least so yeah, the book, but it's still, even like 30,000 words, it's a lot of words.
It's a lot of words.
Like, yeah.
And you have room for it, right? To kind of express yourself. And tweet, you have, 6 to 12 words. And there you want to squeeze in everything and just express the thought. So it looks like we are kind of in a forced environment here to become more superficial and more superficial and more superficial until the moment that we go to the Idiocracy, the movie.
Oh my God, that movie.
I mean,
well, I think with all respect to the current administration, I think the United States is spearheading the world in this regard. Very quickly, we are at the forefront of this development, so to speak. Unfortunately,
could have said something, but I will not.
I'm not meaning any kind of current situation, but sort of the historical development of that, in some sense. No, but yeah, it's kind of sad in that extent. But also there is, like, we should not forget the fact that with the books and articles and all that, there is a certain physicality of the subject that you don't really have with your laptop or with your tweet or your Instagram post or anything, even an online article, because here you feel the book, that it's like, you feel your progress, you feel sort of that it's been written, and you can already detach yourself from it because it's been written, which I think it's harder to do online because you just don't comprehend it as something that has history. Like,
you just
I mean, obviously you can see that it was written like 15 years ago, but it's since it's not material, it is much harder to feel it, to feel the fact that it's been some time ago. And in some articles, you just don't have any timestamps, and you just try to figure out when that was. But with the paper book, even if there is no date on this paper book, and it's like, a Vesuvius manuscript with unclear dating, you feel that it's been a while ago. It's not really contemporary. But I think even with time, in this case, kind of like matter messes up a lot, because when you don't have matter, it's much more difficult to assess it.
Here, my psychologist comes in and says it's just perceptual diversity. Let's call it that way.
Certainly.
Even though we perceive approximately 80% of the information for the brain through the visual system, our perceptual system, right? The I forgot the name. The introspective system makes sense, and how our touch makes sense. So we just create the composite system out of it. And during the child development,
primary, secondary systems, kind
of. There is a haptic system.
Yes.
When you add up your visual experience with perceptual action. So basically, if you watch the kids, for them it's hard to figure out what's the distance. So they often like don't catch things, they just fall, and it's kind of funny when by teenagers, when the parts of the body grow with different speed, and sometimes they just miss the doorway, just because
oh my god, happens all the time to me.
The point is, we all constantly through our body calibrate ourselves to the environment, right? At least to this one that we perceive the way we perceive it, right?
Yeah.
And yes, and that is why when you're having something material, like a thing, it kind of adds up to your experience of this. It kind of limits up. It adds value, so to say. That what I was going to say from the very beginning too. And this is another, I mean, I will keep saying that again and again. Like with every sentence we state, there should be a bunch of footnotes explaining what we are coming from about. But the notion of value it's easy when it's material, right? And I'm not saying through the historical development that the heavier your gold purse was, right?
But in general, it's just like you can feel it, like
you can feel it, exactly.
It's something.
Maybe we can use the notion of embodiment here to an extent.
Yeah.
Basically, that's why I'm too much into psychotherapy recently, and it's kind of important. Embodiment, I would assume that from the philosophical standpoint, it means something like physical, something the body can interact with. And when you feel sad, just hugging people, and if somebody can squeeze you like this, regardless of this, who that is, your friend, your parents, I don't know, your relatives. It's just the fact that the squeeze kind of makes you feel a little bit more in a safe place.
But also triggers memories, even without our own intentions. Like you just kind of, it changes the space where you exist because your mind goes elsewhere, in some sense.
To an extent.
It becomes very different when there's you in the room being hugged by someone than versus you being in the room. Like the whole room changes. Suddenly becomes like a very different value, like everything.
Yeah, like based on this point, I think we can wrap up this conversation, because this is we gave, I think, for the listeners who kind of managed to listen to the very end, we kind of like gave a scope of what we will be talking about.
Yeah,
it's like everything, and that is how we.
Everything, but not really everything. Some parts of everything.
some parts of everything. Some parts of existence. And I really gonna want to start our new episode. Maybe you can make a note for it. Existence versus being.
Oh yeah.
Versus how would you call it? Projecting yourself into from being to existence. Well, just this three several notions, like the basic ones. I know they are too broad, but I mean, they contain a lot within themselves, which is also a heavy thing to lift.
Dense. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that would be a nice sequential.
Yeah. It's good.
Sequential meetings where we could kind of allow ourselves to express and shake the ground and talk about
Yeah.
Just like we did right now. Kind of
Yeah.
interesting. You forced me to think about many things.
Same. I can say the same about you. You forced me to think a lot about different stuff from different perspectives.
So for those who listen to us to this point, again, we're not truth seekers. Are we sense makers? To
I
an
don't know.
extent.
I mean, kind of.
Extent,
Between
kind
each
of.
other. Yeah.
Yeah, but we are definitely all about relativity. And at this point, to finish it, let me show you one thing.
Okay.
This big and famous guy once said,
Oh yeah. It's all relativity. Yes.
it's all relativity, guys.
I love
So,
the shirt. It's
no,
amazing.
we will not change the title. It's going to be Existentia, but
Yeah.
relativity is something that we will be playing around with. So thank you.
It's also relative. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much for inviting me. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to next part of our series. I think the title would be "What is Experience?" But
yes.
it obviously touches on existence and being and all the things. So
Experience,
I think
experience is a good point to start.
yeah,
Yes.
should be a good conversation. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Then
Great.
thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you so much.
And hopefully we see you next time.
Yep. See you next time.